And so, what do you make of this, Joe?
Well, I believe exactly because the next was I've had numerous students comment to me that their departments have been forced to limit the amounts they can order. Certainly, if cops in Texas are complaining about ammo supply, manufacturers have not completely caught up with demand.
Stay there. Let's finish up, John, and get to the crux of what you're saying. Sounds important.
Well, the disturbing video that we showed you last night might not be the only video that was shot in this controversial case.
The investigator Tom Meyer has more tonight with part 2 of his exclusive investigation.
Why did you decide to talk with me?
I don't want this to happen to somebody else.
Greg Steffi and his wife Hope are suing the Stark County Sheriff, accusing deputies of using excessive and outrageous force, an allegation the sheriff denies. But Steffi says this video, shot by deputies and obtained by Channel 3 News, speaks for itself. This case got started with a call to 911 for help. Greg's wife was injured when a cousin assaulted her. When she had someone call the Stark County Sheriff, her troubles got worse. A lot worse. They say a deputy was confused when he arrived at the location where the attack occurred. They say he began treating the injured Steffi not as the victim, but as the troublemaker.
He proceeded to pick her up off the ground and slam her onto the ground.
I read the news today, oh boy.
Women were reportedly being raped by the Toronto police. That was in the news today. A giant armada of U.S. and Israeli ships was openly saying they may nuke Iran. That's what I read in the news today. I read in the news today that a congressional delegation is being blocked from being able to go down and see what's happening in the Gulf. Why don't they just ignore Obama and do what they want? He can't tell them that. You know, the government says I have to have permission to breathe, so I'm going to stop breathing. And you turn purple and die because the government said so. I mean, the government says I've got to pay a carbon tax to breathe. They're actually doing that now, so I better do it. Since when do we let these arrogant packs of criminals who dress in fancy suits sit up there and tell us we're all scum and that we're their property? Let's go back now to the calls because I'm about to get into a bunch of news here. Let's finish these calls quick. Joe in Texas, you're saying, I guess from what you say, you're training police. That's the gist of what I got, and that they're all telling you they're having ammo shortages. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. And they're saying that certainly the cops in Texas are forced to limit the amounts they can order, or rather the amount, or complaining about the ammo supply. Manufacturers have not completely caught up to demand. And I do feel like you, Alex, from what I've listened to you and learned and spread the word to my family and their friends, that this is a government thing. I know that Remington is still in Arkansas making ammunition, and there's places, and that's probably what's still holding what little tiny bit of our economy's left. And, you know, the things that are made in America still. And I do feel
that's what Violence Policy Center and others have said. They said, we're going to shut down the gun industry by suing them and by prosecuting them and the ammo. And now Schwarzenegger got the law passed where all guns sold in California must stamp a number on the shell casing when you pull the trigger. And then that will make, basically, gun manufacturers won't be able to make guns because there's a very expensive patent for it that are just sold in California. I mean, they're destroying our Second Amendment. Look, Sotomayor swore that she would uphold the Second Amendment and believed it was an individual right just, 6-8 months ago. And then she voted to ban guns in the ruling that came down Monday, but thank God she was overruled. She called for a complete gun ban, 4 to 9, 4 to 5 out of the 9. But in the majority decision, it now says, well, the government can still restrict under law. So it's not really a complete victory. In fact, I see it as an overall defeat. But very, very suspicious, Joe. I appreciate your call. I know this. I mean, ammo is at least double what it was in the past. And I go in and try to buy regular cartridges. And they don't have them at a lot of places. And then they'll be sold out at a local gun shop. So I'll go to Academy and they won't have what I need. So I'll about a year ago, I went ahead and went into Walmart just to see if it was true, really. And they wanted my name, my driver's license, all this stuff. They were going to put it in a database. And I just said, you know what, forget it. But John in Texas, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi, Alex.
Hey, buddy.
I think I remember. I think it was under Clinton. I was reading in the paper that the Army ammunition plants that they used to make, the government made the ammunition for the Army. They were shutting them all down.
Yes, and there were a few left under Bush, and then Obama shut them completely down. And they don't allow us to import ammo. They stopped letting the Army sell its brass to reloaders, big companies. So that increased prices. Go ahead.
Most of the ammunition I've seen that for sale is all coming from Russia. 223 and
there were
AK.
giant stockpiles brought in the 80s and 90s, and they may have changed the regulation, but for a while, Obama, because it was outside of law, he was just using regulations, was stopping ammo and foreign guns from coming in. Hell, they're seizing airsoft plastic BB guns now that are coming into the West Coast.
Yeah, I know. You know, Alex, what I wanted to really talk about was the World War II generation is almost gone. I'm a baby boomer. I was born in '49. I'm 60 years old now. When we're gone, nobody in this country is going to realize the freedoms we used to have. They're going to think that what's going on today has always been normal, you know. The reason I'm talking about this, about that kid that went to school with the toy soldiers on his hat, you know, and they kicked him out. Well, when I was in elementary school in the 1950s, we always took toy soldiers to school. We used to take toy guns to school and play cowboys and Indians out on the playground. We used to take jackknives to school, Boy Scout jackknives, and nothing was ever said about it.
My dad took his shotgun to school, and he was in a pretty big rural school, and put it in his locker. They would ride on the school buses with 22s and shotguns. They never had school shootings. We were not a domesticated, castrated population. And when the United States went to war, people were in deep trouble. Because in Europe, they hadn't had guns for hundreds of years and didn't know how to use them. Even if they'd been trained, they just weren't as good as people like Audie Murphy from Texas. And that culture is dying. And, I mean, just in New York, they had shooting clubs. In Manhattan, they had shooting clubs for the young people. And they are killing that culture. They are creating domesticated slaves. And they're doing a great job of it. And, the point you make, I see articles every few weeks about child brings Army man to school, arrested. Child brings toy Star Wars gun. It was less than 2 inches long. Remember that one a couple months ago? And the new one, he had an Army man on his hat. And so they were freaking out. And the images, the government's got all these guns. They're armed to the teeth. They can beat you, kill you whenever they want. But you can't even have the image of a gun. And I see reports constantly about junior high students who will write an essay, and it'll have zombies or wars. I mean, I wrote those in English class and got A+, and they arrest them, even though it's a fictitious school in another country in one case with zombies. And I actually got an A+ for a zombie story in middle school. I remember getting that, and the teacher picked me out to read it before the class and thought it was a great story. And because, your kids see these zombie movies on TV, then you write an article about it. So it's thought crime. And if you want to know how they phase it in generationally, if you think what you see on TV and the culture is domesticated and enslaved, John, if you actually see now what's in the schools, it is like the Twilight Zone 1984. Any other points, John?
Yeah, well, when I was in high school in the early '60s, we didn't have such a thing as school police. I never seen a cop in school. And one time somebody sent off a cherry bomb in school. It used to be a big firecracker, and they got mad about it and went on the intercom and said everybody caught with a firecracker would be kicked out of school. But they didn't call the cops. They didn't call the ATF. And if the guy would have got caught, he got kicked out for 3 days, and then your mother and dad had to come get you back in. But that was it.
Well, no, he would have been probably taken out and made to run, but that's cruel and unusual. See, they always restrict regular training and discipline that'll make us be upright, and then once we're out of control, then they totally enslave us. I mean, the children's movie Pinocchio explains it all. The way the system wants you to be corrupt so they can compromise you, and they would have been run around the football field until they threw up. Then they would have been given pops. Then they would have been sent home for 3 days, and then their parents would have whooped their butt.
But one more thing before I go, Alex. Talking about guns, I remember going with my dad to a pawn shop back in about 1959. He wanted to buy a deer rifle. He went in there and he picked out the gun he wanted. He put the money on the counter, walked out, and that was it. You could if you wanted a deer rifle or a gun, you could send a check in the mail and it deliver right to your house.
To Sears Roebuck, I hear you, John. My son's reading a book, A Boy and the Big Bear or something. It's published 1954. And the whole thing is the 6-year-old kid out hunting bears with his rifle. And then he finds a baby bear and decides not to kill it and then raises it and then has trouble with it. But the point is, that was an award-winning book. It says it won the National Award for Schools and was put in schools nationwide in 1954. And now, I mean, this book is like completely alien. They want us domesticated. Then they have select paramilitary guilds where you're allowed to be macho and allowed to be manly, but it's a false distortion of a bunch of soft weaklings in commando outfits beating up women.